Hey Tracy, welcome to Master Delegator
Hi.
podcast. I'm so excited to have you. I feel like I'm gonna learn from you today. I'm excited about learning more about you, not just your knowledge about business, but also get to know more of you on a personal level. Because we kind of had a short chit chat the last time we met, and you told me about your story, and I feel like it's a very good story to share to other people, to inspire them. And today we're going to be talking about how to make bold decisions in business so we can live a freedom-filled lifestyle. And that's exactly what this podcast is about, living a freedom-filled lifestyle and enjoying your life while growing your business. So I'm so excited to have you. And before we dive in, I want you to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to be here too, Christy. I agree. When we first met last time, I mean, I don't know that two people could talk faster than us two people together because we were so excited and just were really like resonating with everything each other said. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. Um, I'll start. Let's see. And honestly, I don't remember which part of my story I told you, so I'm just gonna kind of give you the once over for how we got here today.
Yeah.
I'm in my 50s. I'm 56, 7, something like that. I
You
always
don't
forget.
look like it. Now, that is something that you did not mention to me when we first met, but you don't look like it.
Well, and the reason why I mentioned that is because I've been coaching for 13 years, but I was in corporate for 17 years before that. And I also took 9 years to go through college, but that's a different story. Um, so I've been an adult for a long time and I've gone through a lot of what I have imagined adulthood would be like from a young age. I grew up in Silicon Valley here in like the South San Francisco Bay Area in California. I live in Santa Cruz now, but I grew up in Cupertino, home of Apple Computer
Mm-hmm.
and, all the other technology companies that are in that South Bay area. And when you grow up in that area, when you grew up in that area in the 80s, long before you were born, my young friend, in the 80s, computers were really just starting to be a thing. And it was a very high energy, high expectation, high achieving kind of environment. So I was taught, conditioned, learned from a young age to, to work really hard and that hard work pays off. And that, if you can achieve a lot, then compensation will come and you'll make money, et cetera, et cetera. And so while it took me a while to get to my corporate career, I finished college in 95 and I worked in uh, corporate offices for 17 years. I actually got to work for a consulting firm, which was great. And I didn't realize how great it was for me until much later because even though I had a boss and a company that I worked for, I was very self sufficient. I got to work directly with clients. I wasn't like, just sitting in a cubicle with my boss over my head every day. I was actually out being quite independent from the first day that I worked for that company. So, and I got to experience a lot of different companies. I probably worked for 10 different client companies in those 17 years. So it gave me a lot of perspective of different management styles, different corporate cultures, all of that kind of stuff, which was very valuable. And I
Mm-hmm.
realize now how much more valuable it is than kind of your typical work for one company that whole time. Um, while I was in that job, my job was space planner. So anyone who's been in a corporate environment, they know like someone keeps track of where everybody's sitting and how much real estate is taken up by which department and the
Mm-hmm.
size of the offices and the cubicles and all that stuff. That was my job, was to keep track of all of that and make sure everyone had what they needed from an environment standpoint to do their job so the company could succeed. And I was really good at it and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. During that time, I met my first husband. We were together for quite a long time. Then we finally decided to get married and start our family. And shortly after our first child was born, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And so, in the 4 years to come, I was still working full time and he was managing his illness situation. And together we were figuring out how to get him the care that he needed, how to take care of our new baby. The plan was he was going to be the stay-at-home dad, and I was going to be, the breadwinner, which is what I was. But soon after his diagnosis and when he started treatments and everything, he really didn't have the energy to be able to do that all day long. So, we adjusted over time to him no longer being the stay-at-home caregiver and just managing his own illness and getting better. He did get better. And then we had another baby, and then he was diagnosed again with a metastasization where the cancer really had taken over much more of his body. And so by the time the kids were 1.5 and 4, my husband Paul had passed away. Paul and I had this dream of, him taking care of the kids, me working. We also had the opposite dream. He was going to go work and we were going to move closer to his family, and he was going to go to work and I was going to be the stay-at-home mom. And this was kind of the alternate reality dream. Before he got sick, that was the thought. And so really what that matched up to between the two of us was a real desire to have someone heavily involved in the kids on a day-to-day basis, being able to be at the school for them, being able to attend events for them and go in the classroom and go on field trips and all of that. And, after he died, I was the only person left. And I really still wanted that for the kids, which was to be able to take time off and go into the classroom and read for an hour, take time off and go on the field trip to whatever, museum or whatever they were going to go to. And so that wasn't going to work when I was working 8 to 5 corporate life. And at the same time, that corporate life, in order to continue to climb the ladder, as they say, I was going to need to continue to work some evenings, some weekends. And again, as the only parent, that just wasn't going to work for me anymore. Mm-hmm. So gratefully, as I came out of that fog of grief, anyone who's been through a significant loss, it just kind of lasts for a while. And then you kind of start to wake up a little bit more and come back into the world. And as I came back into the world, I recognized that my kids needed me. I needed to take better care of myself so that we all could have a life that we enjoyed together. So I found a coach who helped me start to change some of my own personal habits. Again, I'd had 2 babies and been in survival mode for 4 years. So I had some weight to lose, had a lot of habits to change because I had kind of sunken into this difficult practice that wasn't going to serve me long-term health-wise. So I found a coach. They helped me regain my health and taught me how to start helping the people around me who were like, oh my gosh, you just lost a ton of weight. How did you do it? Please tell me how, because everyone wants to know when that happens. And so I started coaching. That happened in April and we're coming up on April here, April 13 years ago, April of 2022 or 2012, sorry. And as I built this coaching practice on the side of being a solo parent and working full-time, I started to think, I wonder if this could finally be the vehicle that got me out of corporate and into a different lifestyle for the family going forward. And within about 6 months, I did the math. I saw the cost of living in California where I lived, which is, way up here, and in Florida, which is where my parents lived at the time. And I said, well, it's a lot cheaper to live in Florida and I'm already coaching. Let's do the math. And how much would I have to make if we moved to Florida to live a similar lifestyle and only be coaching? And what I found was I was already making that much money coaching on the side because Florida is so much cheaper than the Bay Area, or at least it was back then. So I gave my notice and decided to jump out of corporate and become a coach full-time. And that December, we moved to Florida and just took the leap, that bold decision to leave that career and try something new. And it's one of the most proud decisions I've ever made. not because it was super successful, because it's really hard to become an entrepreneur when you have been in corporate for 17 years and someone has been telling you what your job is for almost 2 decades. But I knew that it was the right move for me. So we moved closer to my parents, my sister and her son. And I was very much looking forward to the kids having their opportunity to have an active parent in their
Yeah.
day instead of having me, gone all day.
Right. Yeah. Wow. This is amazing. While you were sharing your story, I just realized, because when you see an entrepreneur or a business owner, you think that that person only wanted to make money, right? Like, oh, that's an entrepreneur, like that's a business owner, like she makes money by doing this. But, a lot of people, they don't realize the reason behind what they're doing. Like you did not choose to become a coach because you wanted the idea of being a coach, right? You wanted to become a coach so that you can be present with your
Right.
kids. And um I feel like that kind of has to change. We need some people, needs to have that kind of awareness that each entrepreneur, you may see us so busy and we're hustling. You may be sort of inspired by what we do, and we appreciate that. But at the same time, there's a reason why we do,
Right.
what we do. And I feel like if they understand the why, they would be more supportive of
Right.
what we're doing, right? So, and that's why I love talking to people,
Yeah,
and hearing their stories, because we all have our unique stories to share to people.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that, most of the women entrepreneurs that I talk to have some sort of story that's similar in the sense that it was the catalyst for them doing what they're doing. um, Almost everyone that I meet that's left corporate, it's a similar story, right? That I didn't want to be tied to a time frame, to a boss, to manage toxic management, whatever their kid. Not that I had that, but because I didn't. But whatever their story is, we all have a story.
Mm-hmm.
As a speaker, that's one of the key things that I have learned to cultivate is all of the stories that relate to the different ways that I do things, the different things that I do, the different reasons behind why I'm so passionate about things like community and things like how sales can be easy and all of those different things that there's a story underneath it. Sales is all about building relationships. And I talk about how I went to 5 elementary schools and had no friends when I was a kid. Or I should say, I was easy to make friends, but I wasn't good at keeping them because I was always moving away.
Right.
So that's one story. Another story might also be that when I moved here to Santa Cruz, after moving to Florida, I was only there for 8 months. I moved back to Santa Cruz, got remarried. That's a whole other part of the story. But, when I moved here, anytime someone moves to a new community, how do you build relationships? How do you build community and friendships? And since I was coaching, I started with traditional networking. I
Mm-hmm.
belong to a group. It was called Leads Club. It's very similar to BNI, where it's a weekly, lunchtime meeting or whatever. And it gave me the confidence because I was talking every week a little bit about myself and a little bit about what I was doing to start to say that to anyone. It built the muscle of being able to use my voice to create new relationships. And
Right.
that's what business and sales is all about, is using your
Exactly.
voice to create new relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually went to a conference one time, and there were, I think, five speakers.
Mhm.
They're big names. And when I was listening to them, I saw a pattern. They start by sharing their own unique story.
Yep,
And then
absolutely.
after that, they integrate, different things. They talk about the lessons they've learned,
Yep,
and then they will integrate different principles that they can share to people, and
yep,
that we can apply to our lives. And so when I saw that pattern, I was like, well, I shouldn't be first embarrassed about sharing my story because that's my story. I need to own it. And second, I shouldn't think that when I share my story, I was just thinking or I was just talking about myself. Because so when you talk about your story, you're like talking about yourself, right? And I'm the type of person that I don't really want to talk about myself that much because I don't want people to see that I'm narcissistic or something, that I love myself too much. But I changed my mindset when it comes to sharing my story. I realized that I'm sharing my story not because I wanted to share my story, but because I want people to take action from my story. And I feel like that's also one examples of being bold, just sharing a part of your life to other people.
Yep.
Otherwise, you won't be able to motivate or encourage other people, unless you share your story. You cannot I mean, you may be able to encourage other people by sharing other people's story, but it's more real when it's your story, right?
Right. Right. I have actually, there's two pieces to that. That is why, two things related to that. So the first one is I never used to talk about my husband passing away
Mm.
because I didn't think anyone could relate to it. Right. I didn't know anyone else who'd lost their husband to cancer or who had died, whose partner had died when they were only 41 years old.
Mm.
Right. I wasn't 65. I wasn't like some old lady. I was 40, 41. I had a baby, still barely walking. So I didn't think anyone could relate to that. And what I found was it, like the grief part of the story and the getting through the fog and the recovery of the trauma to the rest of your life is a common theme for actually everybody. It doesn't have to be the death of a husband or a
Mm-hmm.
spouse. It doesn't even have to be a death at all. It could be a loss of a job, loss of a pet. I mean, that's a death, but it could be loss of a job, a friendship. It's really all about unmet expectations. And as a coach, that's a very through theme for everyone because it's the sadness and the disappointment of that unmet expectation that keeps us from moving forward. So when I talk
Mm-hmm.
about being able to move forward after him dying, it shows people that they can also move forward after whatever their loss has been. And now that we've gone through the pandemic, we've all had a loss of what was to come, a misunderstanding of what the future was to hold for
Right.
us, because every person on the planet experienced that. So it's that understanding that if you have been through something hard and you want to do something different about it, that you absolutely can. And this is my story, and you can have that too. And then lastly, the authenticity of sharing things that are personal gets people to trust you more and to understand that, wow, she was willing to share this really hard thing with me. And I appreciate that. And the lessons that you learn coming out of something that's challenging are the lessons that help you grow.
Or
And
exactly.
it works for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. So speaking of being bold,
Mhm.
so you moved from California to Florida, and then you you had a coach. So that's
Yep.
being bold as well, because nobody wants to be told what to do, right? And if you get a coach, you become accountable, and nobody wants to become accountable, right? I mean, we love the idea, but when it comes to the reality of it being accountable to somebody, you're like, you
It's
know,
really interesting, actually. The coach that I had when I moved to Florida and in those first few years of that part of my business, like saw that I was struggling about going from having a job and a boss to being self motivated. And she says
mm,
to me one day, she says, we're going to make this work. I'm going to treat you like you're my employee, and I'm going to tell you the things that you need to do. And while at the time it felt like, okay, that's great, because I really don't know what to do. At the time it felt right. But in hindsight, it was the opposite, really, of what I needed. Right. She saw that I needed help. And her only way, coming from a similar background, her only way to try to reach me was to be like, girl, you're not doing these things. You need to do these things. as opposed to helping me find that kind of intrinsic motivation that would help
Mm.
me break through the barriers that I had put in front of myself so that I could be self-motivated. So eventually I stopped working with her and I started working with someone else. Because I do believe that all coaches need coaches. And
Yeah.
I know a gal that has like 5 different coaches in all these different categories, which is great. That's, if that works for her, that's great. I have my primary coach and mentor who I've been working with now for 6 years, who has helped me in all of the stages of what's happened since then, right? I moved back to California. I started to build new community. I decided I was going to build an in-person event space so that I could have workshops and events live and in person here in my town. The pandemic hit and we had to close and figure
Mm.
out how to do it all online. And through it all, she's been by my side, challenging me to increase my skills and my abilities. And that is what a true coach and mentor is for, is
Exactly.
to call you on your BS when
Mm-hmm.
you are living in the BS of not actually doing the things that you know will move you and your business forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure that's also what you do with your
Right.
clients, right? You call them out like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. If you want to reach this goal, you need to do this, you know?
Well, not even like you're not supposed to do that, but have you have you have you set a goal in the first place? Goal
Mm-hmm.
setting and the strategy underneath getting those goals is one of my absolute favorite things to teach, because I feel like a lot of people really shortchange their goals, B, aren't clear enough on their goals, and C, once they decide what they do, they freak themselves out and then they don't do the work. So
Mm-hmm.
the accountability and this ongoing support and guidance is really, really crucial. So that's why I do group programs, because it's not just me, it's everyone holding each other accountable. And you're saying it out loud, not just to me, but to everyone else in the room, whether it's a real room or a Zoom room. And I find it so much more effective to have a community around you supporting your dreams and your goals and helping you stay accountable to yourself in order to get there.
Right. Yeah. I love that. So, have you ever worked with somebody that wasn't very,
Open.
that wasn't very like a person that who is stuck in his or her ways and don't want change
Yeah.
and doesn't want to take bold moves,
Right.
like what have you observed, like what were the reasons as to why that person doesn't want to take that next
Yeah.
step, and
Yeah.
then how did you help that person or what helped that person?
Well, I'd like to say I was able to turn them all around and everyone had success, but it's just not reality.
Right.
I work primarily with women. So, or actually at this time I work exclusively with women. Back when I was health coaching in my first few years, I worked with men and women because I had a lot of men friends and women friends who wanted, the support that I was offering back then. Now I'm really working with women leaders and entrepreneurs. And so if I think about someone who is kind of, when you said stuck, like I want to just say it's kind of stuck in your ways, like maybe not stuck where they're trying to go, but like they just don't they're not embracing the idea that change is good, that change is what's required in order to go after this thing that you told me that you wanted. So it starts with, having that clear goal and understanding like this is actually what I want to accomplish. And a lot of times people right there is the problem, because they're not sure what they want to accomplish.
Right.
Oh, it'd be nice, or I'm thinking I might want to do this. Like all of those kind of nebulous ideas around what you want aren't strong enough or passionate enough or like oomphy enough to draw you toward them. And that's really the first thing that's required. Someone who says that they want this really clear thing, but is unwilling to do the steps to get there, is, there's a lot of reasons behind something like that. Often it just comes down to fear. They're afraid of being judged, of not being skilled enough. They have negative self-talk around their own ability and their own beingness in the person who can achieve that. And that's one of, I think, maybe the big things that came to me early on, not came to me, but was told to me early on, was if you really want this big thing, and we can just equate it to money because it's like the easiest example, right? If you want to make 6 figures or 7 figures or 8 figures, you have to become the person who does that. And you can't do that as the person you are today unless you're already doing it. So there's a lot of stories. I don't know if it's a Tony Robbins story or who it is, where, this person made their first $1 million and then lost it. Oh, it just might be Jim Rohn, old school. Made the first $1 million and then lost it all. But the good news was, because they made it the first time, they were able to make it again, because they had become the person who could make $1 million.
Right.
And now that they were that person, they could make it again. It's like the problem with people winning the lottery, right? You win the lottery and you have this windfall, and you're not the person who could earn that $1 million. So you probably are going to lose it. And that's a frequent story for people who win the lotto, is they just waste it all away. And then what happens? Now they're lost because they've seen the taste of it. They can't get it again. And there's a lot of really sad stories around stuff like that, where they didn't become the person who could own that kind of wealth. They just had it, and then they didn't have it, and they still never became. So, coaching is often the guiding toward people becoming what it is that they're going to be. And that's why I focus on bold as my theme, because if you are acting in a way that aligns with the bold decisions that you're making, then you're becoming every step of the way. If it's not a bold act, but just something that falls into your lap, it's not sustainable. And so we have to really become this bold visionary, this bold action taker, in order to be able to sustain it, recover if something goes poorly. We're not always in charge of the economy and the banks and the government and all of that stuff. Hello. So, you never know what's to come, but when you've become the person who can build it, you can build it again.
Right, exactly. And I think you also have to desperately want it, right? Like for instance, my husband and I, we love to go skiing. I ski and he snowboards, and we recently learned how to do that 3 years ago. And because
Nice.
we loved it and it's fun, we want to share it with other people, right? And so we've been inviting a lot of friends to go with us, like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And they're like, oh, I want to try that too. That's awesome. Like, looks fun, blah, blah, blah. But 95% of them did not end up going with us,
Yeah.
up until now. And I was talking to my husband, like, what? I wonder why. Like, they said they want to do it, they want to try it, but they haven't done it. We've been inviting them a few times to the point where, like, tired already of asking them. And then I realized, because I'm the kind of person that when I want something, I want it, you know,
Yeah.
especially if it's something that I'm really passionate about. And so I realized that if you really want something, but if you want something so bad, you will do something about it. You cannot just say, oh, it's my finances, I don't have something, to buy my ski gear or something. Well, you have to wait a year before the next winter season, right? So you can
Right.
save up, $20 a month to buy your ski gear, and if it's really something that that you want to do. So recently I realized, well, maybe they're not doing it because they don't really want it so bad. And
Yep.
because my husband and I wanted it so bad, we're doing it. It's a priority. It's not a priority if you don't desperately want it.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so define bold.
I'm bold. Okay, well, let me give you a little bit of the background. So
Okay.
bold became my kind of theme about, gosh, 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I'll say. I don't know. No, it had to be before that. Anyway, I'll say 6 years ago, whatever, it doesn't matter. Bold became my theme. I was at a retreat that was related to a speaker program, actually, speaker mastermind program with my coach. And we had spent a week together actually on a cruise ship, because cruises are great for retreats because you don't get stuck in traffic.
Mm.
And we spent all week working on our speeches, learning how to be more effective in front of the room, how to do offers from the stage, all of the things that an effective speaker who's an entrepreneur, who's using it for sales, needs to learn. And at the end of our week together, we were given like a name tag, sticker and a Sharpie. And we were told to write on that sticker how we were going to be different when we left the ship. Not what were we going to do. Like, we all had a checklist a mile long of all the things we wanted to go do. But how are we going to be different? This goes back to my talking about the beingness, right?
Mm.
So I decided to write bold in capital letters on that sticker, and I stuck it to my chest. You can see that picture actually as the banner on my Facebook coaching Facebook page. Stuck it to my chest, and it just said bold. And people were like, well, why, what do you mean you want to be bold? Like, you can't tell. I'm guessing, Christy, that I'm a little taller than you. I'm almost 6 feet tall. um all my beautiful Filipino friends are all very tiny to me,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Almost 6 feet tall. I had purple hair at the time, and everyone around me was like, well, look at you, what do you mean you want to be bold? Like, hello. And I said, the thing is that I have been a performer my entire life. I have a dance background. I can stand in front of the room and put on a show any day of the week. But the things that were holding me back were inside me. And that's where the bold needed to live. I needed to be bold on the inside so that I could be more effective and be more successful on the outside, and on the inside. And so from that day forward, I've been using bold as my kind of tagline theme. And now I use it since I grew up in Silicon Valley, I use it as an acronym for every
Mm.
time I'm doing, almost every time I'm doing a speech or teaching a workshop. And I'll use those 4 letters to put a framework around what it is we're talking about. So normally, the kind of through line is that B stands for 4 different things. It stands for believe in yourself,
Mm.
right? Really allow your the things that make you amazing, like, believe them because they are real. O typically will stand for own your unique talents, the things that make you different from everyone else. Own them so that you can stand out in a crowd, so that you can really be like, I'm not like everybody else. These are the things that make me special, and that's why you would want to get to know me. L stands for leap into discomfort, because as a leader and as an entrepreneur, the constant moving towards the uncomfortable is what helps us to grow and to be more confident, believe in ourselves even more. So they all end up tying together, because as you own your unique talents and you leap into discomfort, you become more believing in yourself. And then D, I actually have 2 Ds now. D partially stands for develop resilience, because since we don't know what the future holds, we have to be ready to shift when something doesn't go as we thought, or to keep going when what we're doing doesn't seem to be working, but we just know it's right. You got to be resilient and just make it happen. And then it also stands for dream big, because when you
Mm.
dream big, you can achieve big, and big dreams will foster big action. So dreaming big is super, super important. And it goes back to what we were talking about, having really clear goals. When you dream big and then attach the goals that you're creating to that dream, that's when you're excited about doing the goals.
Right.
because that dream is the thing that you're most passionate about. For me, the dream was to be the parent my kids needed when they only had one. The dream now is more about, they're almost out of the house. It's more about travel and what the empty nest lifestyle is going to be like.
Right.
So, but big dreams need to continue. And in order to get those big dreams, I need to believe in myself, own what's unique about myself, do the things that are uncomfortable, and stay resilient, because who knows what tomorrow holds.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like being bold doesn't also mean that you have everything right, in order,
Mm-mm.
and like I consider myself like a an ambitious person. Like I consider myself a bold person. I have taken so much risk in my life, moving from the Philippines to the States. If I wasn't courageous, I wouldn't be here, starting my own
Absolutely.
business as well.
100%.
But then when they see me, they're like when they see me, they see this joyful, confident Christy Yoder. But they don't know deep inside I had to let go of my fear. I
Mm-hmm.
had to let go of my insecurities, and I had to really be courageous, be brave, be bold,
Yep.
and for some people, for some people who are afraid of being bold, I feel like it's also because there is this mindset that you have to be perfect, that you have
Mm,
to be this already before you can be bold. But that's actually not true. Wherever you are at in your season in life, you can already be bold regardless of how much money you have in your
absolutely.
bank account, right? So
Absolutely.
what would you say to people who are kind of in that season in life right now where they're like just afraid of doing anything because
Yeah.
they just want to play it safe?
Right. Well, so there's a couple of things. It goes back to the fear that we were talking about earlier,
Mm,
right? People are afraid of getting rid of what you have for something better, right? Go from good to great, right? That's a book. I can't remember who wrote it. Um, they're afraid that, people who have this is often the story for people who have regular like 9 to 5 jobs, right? Giving up the security. Now we'll talk about that in a second. Quote, security of a
mm,
steady income, the benefits, et cetera, right? They think that that is safe. And to have that in place, or to decide to let that go, to do something that is unproven, is very frightening for many, many, many people. So there's two pieces to that. One is that it's not guaranteed. And, in this economy and situation right now, I think that it's even more obvious than ever that there is no guarantee. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you're going to have a job tomorrow.
right.
Right? It literally, there is no guarantee. What you can rely on is your own efforts to do something that matters to you. And that requires being bold. It requires a little bit of fearlessness, a little bit of willingness to leap into discomfort. The other thing is that the perfection thing, okay, I don't does anyone want to actually see perfect? No one wants to see perfect people. Now, I love awards shows. Like I love the Oscars, the Tonys, the Grammys, and I love seeing the beautiful people in their beautiful fashions and all of that, but not because they're perfect. I just think it's aesthetically beautiful. But if those people were perfect and there was nothing wrong with them, we would not be so interested in them. That's why gossip exists, right? People always want to know, want to be confirmed that people are not perfect. So, because we know that people are not perfect, why are we still trying to be perfect? Because it literally is impossible. Like, it can't happen. There is no such thing as a perfect person. So why do we keep thinking that we have to be perfect before we show up?
Right.
It's literally impossible. So what if we just started? What's the downside? The downside is, okay, well, it might not go as you thought. Well, that's why you got to be resilient. People might think something about you. Well, that's why you have to like allow to own your own unique skills and talents and not feel prone to judgment. Years ago, I read a book. I probably have it on my bookshelf somewhere. It's called Judgment Detox. It's by an author named Gabby Bernstein. She's a spiritual teacher. She's awesome. In Judgment Detox, when I first started reading it, I thought it was going to be about how can I be less judgmental of other people, because I grew up very smart, sarcastic, like always like, oh, that's hilarious, like very judgmental of other people. And while I had already grown out of that a lot, it still shows up now and then, more so 10 years ago when I read that book than it does today. But when I read the book, I thought it was going to help me be less of that, which would be great. But what I found was that it was actually helping me be less judgmental about myself. And as a result, then you are less judgmental of other people, because really it's all about your own self-talk and feeling like you can't do it. So why can they do it? And it's this point at them and point at yourself kind of thing, judgment. So when we can let go of judgment, because we realize that people can never be perfect, you can allow yourself to not be perfect. And then you can keep going with the things that matter to you and the things you're trying to help other people with, because you don't have to be perfect to start. You know that they're not going to be perfect, and you can show them that that's okay.
Right. Yeah.
And once they understand that they don't have to be perfect, then they can start to leap into discomfort and own their own unique talents and skills and believe in themselves too.
Right, exactly. I love that. And one definition of bold, I don't know, I think it is one definition of bold, but in the Philippines, when we use the word bold, let's say we're watching TV and we say, "Oh, that's bold." That means somebody is naked, you know.
Yeah, and
That's
not
one other definition of
exactly
bold,
in a
right?
good way,
Yeah,
right?
not exactly in a good way, but
Yeah.
just come to think about it, when you want to be bold, you're kind of like naked. You're
Oh,
showing everything you have, and you're like accepting who you are.
yeah.
You may be not literally, naked when you're
Right.
being bold, but it's the same
Yeah,
concept.
it is.
You're
It is.
showing them who you are, your vulnerabilities, your imperfections, and
Yep.
accepting it.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely. I had someone when I was teaching a workshop once, a beautiful Black woman, said a similar thing. And so it's a very
mm,
cultural thing for sure. And she's just like, my mother or my auntie or whatever would say, well, that's bold of you to think da 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 da. And I'm just like, well, I mean, that's accurate. It was bold of you to say that, to think that, whatever. The problem was that they are telling you shouldn't.
mm,
And anytime the should starts to show up in the judgment, in the conversation, that's when we know, like, that word is basically out of my vocabulary. It even like tweaks me just to even mention it in this story, because I literally don't use that word anymore, because there is no should. I can do whatever I want.
mm-hmm,
You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what you should do, and you can't tell me what I should do. And there is no way to do things that is the right way. There's a
mm-hmm,
million ways.
mm-hmm.
There's as many ways as any person could think of times every person on the planet.
Right. Yeah. If
So
I
there
want to
is no
go to
should.
if I want to go to the Philippines on a plane, that's good. If I want to go to the Philippines, by a cruise, that's good. If I just want to ride a car and drive for 2 years going to the Philippines, there's no right or wrong way of going anywhere. Yes, there are easy ways to do things. There are like
Right.
faster way to do things, but it's totally up to you what you can tolerate,
Yep.
right?
It's choose your own adventure.
Yeah,
You get to
exactly.
decide.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So as we wrap up, what words of wisdom do you want to give to entrepreneurs who are already building their businesses, but they're still not being bold? They're still
Yeah.
afraid of taking that leap in their business.
Yeah, I think actually where we just ended in that little anecdote is a really good place, right? The idea that everything that you do is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of times we tell ourselves, I have to do this, I have to do that in order to whatever, to be successful, to make money, to get the sale, to enjoy what I'm doing. I have to do these things. And, when my kids were little, I used to tell myself, oh, I have to make lunches. And anyone who has kids knows making lunches is the worst. Like, I mean, unless you really like cooking, but I am not that person. But making lunches day in and day out for kids who may or may not eat the food, who, like there's a very much a feeling of obligation when it comes to things like that. I also felt like that when I had to take my kids to their activities after school. Like it was pulling me away from my work, and now I have to go do this, and it's a problem. But what I realized when I finally started embracing the idea that everything is a choice is that those things were also choices. I chose to stop what I was doing and sign my kid up for gymnastics and take him to gymnastics every week or every day or whatever, however often it was. And I wanted them to go to gymnastics, and I wanted them to have that experience and use their body and do all the things that having that kind of structured athletic situation was giving to them. And so why was I blaming them for my inability to shift from one activity to the other, for my feeling like it was their fault that I didn't get enough done in the day and now I have to go do this? Well, it's not their fault. And in fact, I want them to do that. So I needed to shift my own thoughts around how I use the rest of my day so that when it came time to take them to gymnastics, I was happy. Same thing with lunches. They could eat school lunch. They could not eat. I could not send something with, I mean, honestly, that happens. Kids don't have lunches every day.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to give my kid a lunch. I wanted to make something that I knew that they would at least enjoy, even if they didn't eat it, because sometimes kids just don't eat. And I wanted to put a little note in there for them to read when they opened up their lunchbox. These are things that I chose to do. And so when I stopped complaining about having to make lunches every day, life got better. And so because I realized that the choice that I was making was something that I wanted. And the reason why I wanted it was out of love, it was out of support, it was out of encouragement, and all of the positive feelings that we want to bring to the people that we care about in our lives, whether they're family, friends, clients, or just the world. So when we can focus on the choices that we make being the things that we want, it's the whole be the change that you want to see in the world. If the choices that you're making are in support of how you want to show up in the world for other people, for the world at large, and for yourself, then it's a lot easier to make the choices that you need to get the goals that you want to get. So everything is a choice.
Right, exactly. It's a choice to be positive when you wake up in the morning.
Yep.
It's a choice to complain,
And if it's a challenge, then you get to decide to start to whittle away at that, right? Because it's not like a light switch. You can't just be a grump and then all of a sudden be Pollyanna. People used to call me Pollyanna, so I use that as a positive. Because, but you can start. You can be like, you can recognize your negative self-talk and be like, that's not going to support me today. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to start to change it. I am getting better at this every day. The idea of how you talk to yourself and shifting that from negative to positive is one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself in their life.
Exactly. I love that. Well, where can people find you online, Tracie?
I'm on all the socials. Well, I'm not on X, but I'm on everything else. So, Facebook is where we hang out in the Gather community because we've got our Facebook group there. We've got 1,000 people plus in there now, which is very fun. But you can also find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, the Gather community as well. Websites, we've got both Gather community and my website. A great place to find everything under one umbrella is at tracieroot.com/links, because there I have like all of the links.
Yeah, awesome. And if you are someone who's looking for a community, I highly recommend the Gathering community. Like I've been there like twice already, and I just love all the women that are
Awesome.
part of that community. They're very welcoming, they're very warm, and you can really sense their authenticity. And I feel like it's because of who you are too, Tracie, because you're the one leading them. So the values and the culture that you have, for yourself, um, I feel like somehow is being passed on to them,
Yeah,
because you're the coach.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, not people who aren't into being in a positive place aren't going to come very
Yeah.
often, right?
Yeah.
It's we like attracts like, and the Gather community's been, in existence for 5 years. So we have built over the course of, the pandemic, trying to figure out what the heck we were doing year over year, to now being past all of that. And like, what do women leaders and women in business, women entrepreneurs, what do they want from an
Mm.
online community? And that's always my just recurring thought. What can I offer? How can I support them? How can I help them connect to each other and grow their own networks, their connections, their relationships, so that the community as a whole can thrive? And it's been an amazing journey, and it's not over yet. So come on down.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And let me correct myself. It's the gather community, not the
That's right.
gathering.
Well,
I'm glad I
that's all
caught
right. And if
myself.
you find us on Facebook, it's the Gather Community with Tracie Root. So it's easy
Mm.
to find with my name on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tracie. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks. Thanks, Christy. It was my pleasure. Thanks for allowing me to tell all my stories. But I
Of
still got a few
course.
left for next time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if we can only do this podcast for 5 hours, I'm down for it.
I know, right?
All right.